Giadiva Cardia, Tasulag and Goilshiv Imar Slancha. I hope everybody's keeping okay. And I've some work to keep you busy. I'm sure you're glad of it. Right, so this is the Aimsir Láithreach, the present tense. Hosim Wajer Riv Stopu and Shin and Chark and Dewey Heart. We did get started on it the week before we finished. And some of these are in different stages. But I'm going to talk you through it from the start by way of revising it, okay? So what do I mean by the present tense in English? Before I even get into the Irish of it, the present tense talks about things that happen on a regular basis, right? So it might be every day, every week, every month, every year, every Christmas, gach nullag, gach sauru, gach inya, you get the idea. So the word gach is going to feature a lot here, meaning every. And this is where the whole kale, lahan thing comes in. The whole broad with broad and slender with slender. So what do I mean by broad and slender? Well, basically the vowels are divided into two groups. So you have your A, O and U, which are broad, and your I and E, which are slender. So why do I need to know that? Because all verbs are either broad or slender depending on the last vowel in the stem. Now, it doesn't matter if there's 17 vowels in it. If the last vowel is A, O or U, then that's a broad verb. If the last vowel is I or E, then that's a slender verb. Mar hampla. Tog is broad because of the O. Glan is broad because of the A. Brish is slender because of the I. And Kyle is slender because of the I. So you can see with the Kyle there, there's a broad one and a slender one. But we look at the last vowel. That's what dictates what makes it broad or slender, okay? So that's what I mean by a broad or a slender vowel and broad and a slender verb. Why do we need to know that for? Because broad verbs need to have broad endings and slender verbs need to have slender endings. We need to make sure we're choosing from the right list, okay? Right, there's a wee rule you can depend on. Now, when we were talking about the Aimsir Catcha, you had the stem of a verb plus the H plus the person. There's no sign of a H here. Don't be adding H's out of pure habit or D apostrophes or anything like that. Our present tense rule when we're talking about gach la is stem of the verb plus the correct ending. Now, don't let the terminology throw you off. Remember, the stem of the verb is just the verb in its simplest form, the general action to do something. Exactly as you find it in the dictionary. So before you say when the action's been done or who's doing it, before you've done anything to it, it's the verb in its simplest form as you find it in the dictionary. So cur would be to put, las to light, eisht to listen, fag to leave, ol to drink. I could go on forever. All of those wee stems are what you find in the dictionary before you get working on them. So what do I mean by adding the correct ending? Now, all endings are either broad or slender, just like all verbs are either broad or slender, and we need to make them match. We need to make them agree. So here's your broad endings and your slender ending for may, for I, for you, for he or she, for we or us, for yous, speaking to more than one person, and for they, right? Now, while it's the last vowel in the verb that decides if it's broad or slender, it's the first vowel in the ending that makes the ending broad or slender. Do you see that? I and E, and so on. Right? So basically, the last vowel in the verb has to match the first vowel in the ending. If the last vowel in the verb is broad, the first vowel in the ending should be broad. If the last vowel in the verb is slender, the first vowel in the ending needs to be slender. So we need to make sure we're choosing from the right list according to the person doing the action. Couple of sampling, shall. I take the bus to school every day. Now remember your rule, stem of the verb plus the correct ending. So what's the stem of the verb? It's tog. Then I decided that tog was broad. And I chose my correct broad ending for may because it's I. And there it is, A-I-M. There's no separate may. So the may is built into the ending. It would never be like togam may on busser skull. Togam on busser skull gach la, broad stem, broad ending. Let's have a look at a wee slender example now. I break the rules. So the verb to break is brish. There you have it. And I'm choosing my correct slender ending for may, which is I am. And again, no separate may. Now, can you see what I've done there? The stem matches the ending. They're two different letters, I know, they're two different vowels, but they're both broad. That's what makes it match or agree. And likewise here with the brisham, always broad with broad, slender with slender, céal le céal agus leathan le leathan. Now, all this applies to verbs with one syllable in them. So if you look at the verbs I've used, brish, cur, ol, tog, fan, fag, éist, whatever, they're all one syllable verbs. Just have it in the back of your head that there are two syllable verbs as well, and we need to tackle those at a later point, but they all end in either IGH or AIGH, or the vast majority anyway. So the likes of canny, tossy, crackney, ulvi, and so on. But we'll come back to that. There's a couple of examples. Let's practice the one syllable verbs before we move on. So you might be able to guess that this is glan, and this one here is cur. Glan. I clean, you clean, he or she cleans, we clean, yous clean, and they clean. So you can see here there's no sign of a H anywhere. That's not in the rule, so there's no need to add a H. I've given me stem, I've decided it's broad, and I've added all of my broad endings. Okay, let's do the same now for cur, which is slender because of the I. I put, you put, he or she puts, we put, yous put, they put. Okay, always slender with slender, 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 slender with slender. You get the idea. Okay, so that's an example of a broad verb with all its broad endings and a slender verb with all its slender endings. And a wee reminder, there's no separate may in the present tense. There's no separate mwj in the present tense. Okay, it's kind of built into the ending for you. Now let's deal with the two syllable verbs. For these verbs, thankfully, the present tense rule is basically the same. It's the same principle. The only thing that changes is the endings that you're choosing from. Examples of two syllable verbs, you will have seen most of these before, would be canny, to buy, and hopefully you can hear there's two syllables in those. Canny, crackney, balyi, could I could go on, tossy, ulvi, ibri, douchey, rachy, and so on. So now those are all what we call infinitives. So if you looked up the verb buy in the dictionary, you would see canny. If you looked up finish, you would find crackney. I can't just go ahead though and start adding endings onto these words because they'd be far too long. Like you'd end up with far too long a word. So what we have to do is kind of condense it down a wee bit. We've been given the infinitive there, but you have to create the stem so that you don't end up with a mad long word, okay? To do this, you just knock off the IGH or the AIGH. They all end in either IGH or AIGH. Only then do you decide if the verb is broad or slender, once you've created the stem. Now that won't make sense until you see the next bit. So on the left, I have the infinitive, as you find it in the dictionary, and on the right, you have the stem. So once I've basically kind of knocked off the tail end of it, the bit I'm left with is the stem. Only then do I decide that it's broad because of the a. Have a look at the next one. Crackney, and knock off the tail end of it, like that. What I'm left with is my stem, and it's broad because of the o. Balyi is slender because of the I, once I knocked off the IGH. Sorry if I'm going out of focus there. Could is slender because of the I. Okay, so basically you're knocking off the tail end of it to make it more practical to add an ending basically. And then we're going to be using, just like what we saw with the one syllable verbs, it's going to be broad with broad, slender with slender, as per. That's standard. Now that doesn't just apply for the Aimsir Láithreach for the present tense. It doesn't even just apply for verbs. It applies for, that spelling principle applies for verbs and nouns and adjectives and people's names. So it's something for you to work on and to be aware of in an effort to improve the accuracy of your spelling and that. Like you should be able to spot where you've made a spelling mistake sometimes. So here's the endings we're choosing from for the two syllable verbs. So the endings we were using before, no good to us for these ones. We have to choose from different lists. And here they come. For I, you, he or she, we, use, and they. Okay, now you might be thinking, well, how the hell am I supposed to learn all these different lists of endings? But they're not that different from each other. Like, the only difference between this list and this list is the extra a, which would have to be there to make the ending broad. Okay, whereas these all start slender. Okay, remember, with the verb, it's the last vowel has to match the first vowel in the ending. Okay, now a couple of things to point out here. A reminder, no separate may, no separate which. But also, will you watch out that you have your fada on here? The only difference between the one syllable endings for may and the two syllable endings is that wee fada. And you do hear it. Like, if I go to say I buy, it's not cianum, it's cianium. I waken up, it's not douchim, it's douchium. That's what the fada does. It makes the vowel longer and stronger. Likewise down here. This is not imwij, it's iamwij. And this is not imwij, it's iamwij. As in cianiamwij, douchiamwij. The only difference between the one syllable endings and the two syllable endings are those two wee fadas there. So make sure they're in there, okay? My shiv. Okay, so a couple of sampler. Over here, and don't be thinking, no, this verb is re. Remember, we're on about two syllable verbs here. This is tussie, and this one's going to be ibri. So tussie looks like this, and Aimsir Láithreach. I start, you start, he or she starts, we start, you start, and they start. So first thing I did was to create my stem by doing that. Decided it was broad and added my two syllable broad endings. And I haven't forgotten me fada for the may or for the mwij. Okay, now, so mar hampla, tussie mar skulgach la clog. Okay, have a look at ibri, which is slender. How do I know it's slender? Because once I knocked off the tail end, the bit I'm left with, the last vowel in it, is I. That makes it slender, and that means it's going to need slender endings. So I work, you work, he or she works, we work, yous work, they work. Ibrium, Ibrian two, Ibrian she no she, Ibrium widge, Ibrian shiv, and Ibrian shade. So you can see you've had an extra wee job to do here to create the stem. Only then do you decide if it's broad or slender and go ahead and add your two syllable endings because they were originally two syllable verbs. I hope that helps. You're getting to see me in the background now. I'm going to upload this and I'll notify you, okay, when I have a wee exercise for you to do. Gurmaigav, am or of.